All right. Now we're going to talk about the relationship between ASAD, the model itself, and then the Phillips curve. I mentioned in the previous video about how you can kind of think of the two as mirror images of each other, and this part of it will really drive that home. So this is an important note to make. When we increase the price level in the ASAD model, so for example, demand increases and the price level goes up, we're talking about perhaps an increase from 100 to 105. So that would be an increase in prices of 5%, but that's a one-time thing. It's not a constant or continuous uh, increase in prices. The Phillips curve, on the other hand, when we have 5% on the y-axis, for example, that means 5% inflation in prices of goods and services year after year, so long as that level, that rate is maintained. So they're not, even though they mirror each other, they're not equivalent, and that's important to bear in mind. The AP rarely throws this curveball at you, but just know that a change in price level is a one-time event, whereas a change in the Phillips curve or a change in inflation is a continuous event, meaning that inflation rate will continue to compound. All right. The first one, again, we have ASAD on the left and the Phillips curve on the right. Our starting position, if you can guess, is a deflationary gap, also called a recessionary gap. So typically the government might want to close the gap and get back to the long run equilibrium. They enact policies that change something about one of the determinants of AD. AD therefore will shift to the right. And you'll notice on the right hand side of it, the diagram, on the right hand side in the Phillips curve diagram, that we move along the Phillips curve. So if we go back just once again, follow the orange. So the increase in aggregate demand on the left leads to an increase in inflation on the right. So while they're not entirely equivalent, they do mirror each other in some respects. So on the left, we have an increase in price level, an increase in output. And on the right, we have an increase in inflation, a movement up the curve from a position where there's higher unemployment, a higher U rate, to a lower U rate. In this case, the natural rate of unemployment, which is equivalent to an economy operating at full output or full employment output. And the story beneath would be any of the determinants of AD changes, therefore AD shifts right, output increases, price level increases, therefore unemployment goes down, inflation goes up, and we move up to the left on the SRPC. So decrease in AD, in this case, inflationary gap is our starting point, or positive output gap, also called. Government does something, or the Federal Reserve does something to decrease aggregate demand. AD shifts left, the price level decreases, output decreases. And at the same time, in Phillips curve land on the right-hand side, we move down and to the right along the Phillips curve. So we move from a higher inflation rate to a lower inflation rate, and from an unemployment rate that's below NRU to the NRU. So in both cases, they're mirroring each other. On the left, we have a decrease in price level, we have a decrease in output or an increase in unemployment. And on the right, we have a decrease in inflation and we have an increase in unemployment. So looking at SRAS, again, starting point, deflationary or recessionary or negative output gap. Government typically wants to do something about that. So in this case, they may incentivize firms, or firms could act on their own, depending on the model you believe. So if SRAS were to shift to the right, so we go from P to P1, and we end up at a position where we have increased output from Y to YF, which is full employment output. You'll notice on the right-hand side of the slide that SRPC is shifted left. So in both cases, again, they mirror each other. The price level has gone down, output has gone up. unemployment has gone down. And on the right-hand side, we see this mirror. So inflation has gone down and output has gone up, resulting in less unemployment. And then you have the story underneath. So again, one of the determinants of SRAS changes, therefore SRAS would shift right. We get these results: increase in output, decrease in price level, decrease in unemployment, decrease in inflation, SRP shifts left. And we can call this disinflation. So going from pi to pi subscript 1, we still have inflation. It's just lower than before. So we call this state of affairs disinflation. So inflation still exists, it's just at a lower rate than it was previously. So let's look at the other example, SRAS shifting left. So in this case, we're starting at full employment equilibrium on the left-hand side in ASAD land. For whatever reason, SRAS were to shift left. You'll notice it's mirrored in the Phillips curve. SRPC shifts right. And again, they mirror each other. SRAS shifting left causes the price level to increase. It causes unemployment to increase, or employment to decrease. We go from YFE to Y1. And then SRPC, it shifts to the right. We end up with higher inflation. And then we also end up with more unemployment. So this is, for an economy, not an ideal situation because there would be more people out of work, prices would be higher. This is very similar to the situation with OPEC in the 1970s. We call this stagflation. Stagnation comes from the greater unemployment. Inflation comes from the increased inflation. So this is just a summary of what's come before. If you can remember these things, you are knowing enough to be dangerous, which is a good place to be. I would, just going back here, I would not try to memorize the stories. I would just feel comfortable drawing the diagrams because it takes 2 or 3 seconds to draw a diagram. So when in doubt, sketch it out, or when in doubt, graph it out. That way you check yourself before you wreck yourself. It's possible that you make a mistake during the stress of exam day or test day, and it's much easier to take a couple more seconds, sketch it out, make sure that you have the right understanding of what's happening given a certain prompt. And then these are, again, just if you want to flip through these slides back and forth to kind of go through the mirror images. But in this case, AD shifts right. We move up and to the left along the SRPC. AD shifts left. We move down to the right. And there's color correspondence. So the red dot, you'll notice, corresponds to the red dot on the Phillips curve, and the green dot to the green dot. In this case, aggregate supply, or SRAS, shifts left. The SRPC shifts right. In a case where aggregate supply shifts right, SRPC shifts left. And on and on. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me. If you would like additional videos or questions answered or additional practice, please let me know. But I will be sending plenty of practice your way.